The New Mexico wind cut across the desert like a blade as Ezra S. Whitfield crawled through the creosote and prickly pear, his ears destroyed and his hearing gone from the dynamite blast they'd set off next to his head. Blood trickled down his neck, staining his once pristine collar. The sun beat down mercilessly, each ray like a hammer blow against his already throbbing skull. At 56, the former territorial telegraph operator had transmitted thousands of messages, coordinated countless emergency responses through rapid communication, and spent 23 years bringing the miracle of instant connection to the scattered settlements of the frontier. His fingers, calloused from decades of tapping out Morse code, now clawed desperately at the parched earth. Each movement sent waves of pain through his battered body. The taste of copper filled his mouth as he bit down on his lip to keep from crying out. Not that anyone would hear him in this desolate stretch of desert. But he'd never expected to be deafened and left for dead by his own telegraph company supervisor, betrayed for the crime of refusing to intercept and alter messages that would cover up a massacre of Apache families. "You're too honest for modern communications, Whitfield," Supervisor Carver had sneered as his hired thugs strapped the dynamite to Ez's head. The memory of Carver's face, that smug, self-satisfied expression, burned in Ez's mind even as his consciousness threatened to slip away. This territory's got no use for operators who can't tell the difference between messages and military secrets. Ez remembered the cold metal of the telegraph key beneath his fingers as he decoded the original messages. Reports of unprovoked violence against peaceful Apache settlements. Women and children slaughtered while the men were away hunting. The secrets had been Carver's scheme to intercept telegraph messages, reporting the slaughter by a rogue cavalry unit, then alter the reports to make the massacre appear justified. When Ez discovered the conspiracy and refused to falsify the communications, Carver had decided that a tragic telegraph accident would solve his problem permanently. Should have stuck to sending messages instead of reading them. Carver had laughed as they lit the fuse, his voice the last thing Ez would ever hear clearly. "Maybe the buzzards will appreciate your communication skills." The explosion had been like the end of the world, a flash of white-hot pain followed by absolute crushing silence. They'd left him for dead in a shallow ravine, not bothering to confirm his demise. Their mistake. Despite his age and injuries, Ez had survived on stubborn determination and the water from his canteen, which had miraculously remained intact. Now Ez dragged himself through the thorny desert scrub, his destroyed eardrums leaving him in a world of complete silence, his vision blurred from the concussion and the merciless desert sun. His once neat mustache was caked with dust and blood, his telegraph operator's uniform torn and filthy. Each breath felt like inhaling fire, his lungs burning from exertion and dehydration. In the distance, shimmering through the heat haze, he spotted a cluster of buildings beside a water tank. The first sign of civilization he'd encountered since the explosion had stolen his hearing forever. The sight gave him renewed strength, and he pushed forward with desperate energy, ignoring the thorns that tore at his flesh and the stones that cut into his palms. The way station sat at the junction of two stage routes, surrounded by corrals and telegraph poles that spoke of someone who understood the vital importance of communication in the isolated frontier. A weathered sign swung gently in the breeze. Thunder Mesa Station. Ez collapsed at the station platform, his blood staining the weathered planks. His vision darkened at the edges as he used the last of his strength to pound weakly on the door. The door opened to reveal a woman in her late 40s, her dark hair streaked with premature silver and pulled back in a practical style, her brown eyes holding the sharp intelligence of someone who'd learned to read both Morse code and human nature with equal skill. She wore the practical clothes of a frontier businesswoman, a simple blouse and skirt of sturdy fabric, with a leather tool belt around her waist that held telegraph pliers and wire cutters. She moved with the confident efficiency of someone accustomed to handling any crisis the communication business could produce. Ez couldn't hear her voice, but he could read her lips as she said, "What happened to you?" Her expression shifted from surprise to concern as she took in his battered condition. "Telegraph supervisor," Ez managed to say, though he couldn't hear his own voice. The strange sensation of speaking into a void disoriented him further. My own supervisor tried to kill me. The woman, he'd later learn her name was Sarah Sally Mackenzie, helped him inside without hesitation, her strong arms supporting his weight with surprising strength. Her way station was well organized and equipped with the latest telegraph equipment, suggesting someone with genuine expertise in frontier communications. A Morse key sat on a polished desk surrounded by message logs and technical manuals. Maps of telegraph lines covered one wall, with colored pins marking relay stations and potential trouble spots. Sally's lips moved as she examined his injuries, and Ez realized she was asking about his ears. He pointed to them and shook his head, then wrote on a piece of paper, "Can't hear anything. Dynamite blast." Sally's expression darkened with recognition. She'd seen this kind of systematic violence before, the calculated brutality of men who used technical positions to cover their crimes. She wrote her response, "Bastards. Always ready to destroy what they can't control." For 3 months, Ez drifted between consciousness and fever, while Sally tended his wounds with a mixture of frontier medicine and knowledge she'd gained from years around telegraph stations. She cleaned his wounds with whiskey and packed them with herbs gathered from the surrounding desert. At night, when the fever raged worst, she sat beside his bed, cooling his forehead with damp cloths and ensuring he didn't tear his bandages in his delirium. She couldn't restore his hearing. Too much damage had been done. But she managed to save his life and help him adapt to his new silent world. She taught him to read lips with greater precision and developed a system of hand signals they could use for quick communication around the station. More importantly, she showed him that his value wasn't diminished by his disability, that his knowledge and experience remained intact even if his hearing was gone. When Ez finally sat up clear-headed, he found Sally operating the telegraph with the skilled precision of a master operator, handling multiple conversations simultaneously while managing the way station's other business. Her fingers danced across the key, sending messages at a speed that would impress even veteran operators. Her operation was more than just a message relay. It was a vital communication hub that kept the scattered frontier communities connected. Ez watched her work, admiring the efficiency with which she managed the flow of information. She seemed to anticipate messages before they arrived, preparing responses and routing information with an intuitive understanding of the network's needs. This wasn't just technical skill, it was communication artistry. Ez wrote on his slate, "You know telegraphy." Sally wrote back, "I know enough to keep the territory connected. Out here, a broken wire can mean life or death." She paused, then added, "And I know when someone's trying to break that connection deliberately." Her story emerged slowly through written conversations over meals and during quiet evenings. Sally had come west with her husband, a telegraph engineer who'd taught her the technical aspects of wire communication and message handling. Together, they'd established this station at the crossroads of major routes, building a reputation for reliability that drew business from across the territory. They'd built a successful operation until claim jumpers murdered her husband and tried to steal their telegraph franchise. Rather than flee, Sally had fought back with Scottish determination, learning to maintain the lines herself and hiring guards to protect her property. She'd eventually established her way station as the most reliable communication point in the territory, earning the grudging respect of competitors who'd initially dismissed her as a helpless widow. "Men think a widow can't understand electricity," she wrote one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. "They learn different, or they learn to send their messages elsewhere." Ez told her about Carver's conspiracy through careful writing, explaining the intercepted messages and the covered-up massacre. His hands trembled as he described the systematic alteration of military communications, the deliberate mistranslation of Apache peace overtures, and the fabricated reports of hostilities that justified brutal retaliation against innocent people. Sally read his account without judgment, occasionally nodding as if she'd suspected such corruption existed. Her eyes narrowed at certain details, and Ez could see her making mental connections to message patterns she'd observed passing through her station. "This supervisor Carver thinks telegraph lines are just tools for lies," she wrote, her pencil pressing hard enough into the paper to nearly tear it. Ez replied, "He thinks I'm a fool for believing in accurate transmission. Too rigid to understand that telegraphy is about controlling information, not sharing it." Sally wrote back, "Maybe he's right about one thing. Maybe the old way of communication is finished. Question is, what are you going to build to replace it?" Their partnership began when a series of garbled messages threatened to trigger a war between cavalry units and Apache tribes, with both sides receiving conflicting information that could lead to unnecessary bloodshed. Ez's knowledge of telegraph protocols, combined with Sally's understanding of frontier politics and communication networks, allowed them to trace the source of the confusion and restore accurate communication before violence erupted. They worked through the night, Ez analyzing message patterns while Sally maintained connections with key stations. Together, they identified deliberate interference in the communication chain. Someone was inserting false information at specific relay points. By morning, they'd not only corrected the immediate misunderstandings, but had also established new verification protocols that would make such manipulation more difficult in the future. Sally wrote, "You still know your trade." Ez replied, "No codes, no protocols, know how to read the truth when messages lie. Out here, that's still worth something." Word spread through the New Mexico territory about the way station at Thunder Mesa, where Sally Mackenzie and the deaf operator could solve communication problems that had stumped territorial authorities for years. Stagecoach drivers began stopping even when they had no official business, bringing messages and rumors that helped Ez and Sally build a comprehensive picture of communication patterns across the territory. They developed a reputation for reliability that extended from the Rio Grande to the Colorado border. Military commanders, merchants, and even Apache leaders began routing critical communications through Thunder Mesa, knowing that messages sent from there would arrive uncorrupted and unaltered. More importantly, they found in each other something they'd both thought lost: intellectual companionship, shared purpose, and the deep love that comes from working together to keep vital connections alive in an isolated world. Their relationship grew from professional respect to personal affection, expressed through small gestures. Sally learning to sign rather than always writing notes, Ez repairing her equipment with meticulous care, both of them developing the shorthand of long-term partners who can communicate volumes with a glance. The confrontation with Supervisor Carver came 18 months later. He arrived with territorial officials and forged documents, claiming Ez was mentally incompetent due to his injuries and needed to be placed under Carver's care as his former supervisor. His wagon kicked up dust as it approached the station, flanked by hired guns whose hands rested too casually on their holsters. "There's the old deaf mute," Carver announced, pointing at his former operator. Living in isolation with some Scottish spinster, probably can't even remember Morse code anymore. Ez emerged from the way station, no longer the broken man Carver had tried to murder. Hard work and purpose had strengthened his body, while finding his true calling had restored his confidence. His hearing was gone, but his mind was sharp, and his hands could still work a telegraph key with masterful precision. He stood straight-backed on the porch, his eyes clear and focused, his expression one of calm determination rather than fear. Ez held up a slate with carefully written words. "Carver, you look prosperous. Does the Army pay well for covering up massacres?" "Don't get smart with me, Whitfield. I'm here on official territorial business." Carver's face flushed with anger as he waved a sheaf of papers. "These documents say you're mentally unfit after your accident. I'm here to take you back to proper care." Sally stepped out beside Ez, a rifle cradled in her arms, and spoke aloud while writing her words for Ez to read. "Official? Funny thing about that. I sent some messages to friends in Santa Fe and Washington. Seems the federal government's been investigating communication fraud." Carver's confidence wavered as he realized they'd been building a case against him for months. Sally's connections throughout the Telegraph network had provided access to message logs and expert testimony that painted a clear picture of systematic information manipulation and cover-up. The evidence was damning: altered dispatches, falsified reports, and deliberate misinformation that had led to unnecessary deaths. "This is a setup," Carver sputtered, his hand moving toward his gun. "No," came a new voice from the mesa above. "This is justice." Chief Victorio emerged from the rocks with a dozen Apache warriors, their faces painted for war. They'd been tracking Carver's movements since learning of his role in covering up the massacre of their people. Their presence wasn't threatening, it was witnessing, ensuring that this moment of accountability would not be erased from history like so many others. "You want to hide the murder of our families?" Victorio called out in perfect English. "Hide your own death first." The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. Carver's officials were outnumbered and outgunned, facing not just angry Apaches, but federal investigators who'd been tracking his conspiracy for over a year. The hired guns looked nervously at each other, clearly calculating whether their pay was worth dying for. "This isn't over," Carver snarled, backing toward his horse. "Yes, it is," came another new voice. A federal marshal rode up to the station, flanked by territorial investigators and several angry army officers who discovered Carver's plan to use their communications as cover for systematic atrocities. "Supervisor Carver, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and accessory to murder." Carver's empire crumbled quickly once federal authorities began examining his message logs and interviewing witnesses. His conspiracy had reached far beyond the original massacre cover-up, involving systematic manipulation of military communications that had led to unnecessary conflicts across 3 territories. He died in federal prison 2 years later, still claiming he'd only been trying to maintain military security. After the arrest, Sally wrote on Ez's slate, "Feel better?" Ez wrote back, "Feel connected. For the first time since they destroyed my hearing, I feel like I'm truly communicating again." Their partnership deepened into something more profound than business or convenience. They established a communication service that served the entire territory, providing reliable message transmission and emergency coordination to anyone who needed it, regardless of their ability to pay standard rates. They trained young operators in both technical skills and ethical standards, creating a new generation of communicators who understood that accuracy and integrity were inseparable. Sally wrote one evening as they sat watching the sunset, "We make quite a team." Ez replied in writing, "We make a network, the kind built on truth rather than lies, on connection rather than control." At 58, Ezra Whitfield was no longer the broken-down operator who'd been deafened and left for dead by a corrupt supervisor. He was a guardian of honest communication, a protector of vital connections, and living proof that expertise mattered more than physical ability. His disability had become a strength in its own way, making him immune to the distractions that often plagued other operators and giving him a unique perspective on nonverbal communication that proved invaluable in their work. The desert that had nearly claimed his life had instead given him purpose, partnership, and the chance to use his skills for something greater than mere message transmission. He'd found not just survival, but redemption in the stark beauty of Thunder Mesa. And Sarah Mackenzie had found something she'd thought lost when her husband died. Not just love, but professional partnership with someone who saw her technical knowledge as genuine expertise rather than feminine dabbling, who understood that the strongest networks are built on trust, accuracy, and mutual respect. Together, they'd created something neither could have built alone, a communication hub that served as both business and moral center for the territory. Together, they'd carved out their own piece of the American dream in the stark beauty of New Mexico's high desert, proving that sometimes the people society discards become the ones who maintain the most vital connections. Their way station became a beacon of reliability, Thunder Mesa Communications, where honest transmission and technical excellence went hand in hand. The stagecoaches still rolled past their station, carrying passengers and mail across the expanding West. But now they carried something else as well. The knowledge that there were still places where truth mattered more than convenience, where destroyed hearing couldn't destroy an unbreakable spirit, and where 2 people who'd been written off by the world proved that the most important messages are those sent with integrity, received with understanding, and transmitted with the unwavering belief that honest communication is the foundation of civilization itself.